Hello and welcome into another NHL video. Today I have a video that is kind of like Elliot Friedman's 31 thoughts, but these are my 31 questions, one per team. Just a question I have about each team going into the season. Pretty simple concept. Thanks for the support the channel's been getting lately. If you like my content, feel free to subscribe and like the video. Let's get into it though. We need to be quick to get through all 31 teams. First team up is the Ducks, and my basic question is, will young players emerge? The Ducks don't have a ton to look forward to this year, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to be the best team in the league, but prospects. Will young players emerge? Will a Max Comtois, a Sam Steele, maybe a Zegras if he can find his way into this team, an Isaac Lundstrom who should be on the second line? Who will emerge as a good young player and give that Ducks fan base some hope? We then move into the Coyotes. The Coyotes, in my opinion, are going to be at the close to the bottom of the league. I just don't see a lot in their lineup. Now, they're a pretty gritty team, so there is a chance for them if Kemper can carry them, and that is the question. Can Kemper carry the Coyotes to be a relevant team and a borderline playoff team? I'm not liking the odds, but Kemper, it's all on you. We then go to the Bruins. The Bruins last year won the President's Trophy, and my question is the left side of the defense good enough anymore to be that caliber of team to be in the top 3, top 4 teams in the league? Now, I think it's possible, but it's very much to be determined how good this left side will be for them and if that is going to impact how high they finish in the standings. Lozon, Grzelcyk, and Zaboral. Last year it was Grzelcyk, Krug, and Chara. So a lot to be seen there and to determine how good the Bruins are. We then go into the Buffalo Sabres, and is Taylor Hall the missing piece? The Sabres have not been good for a while. They got some young players in the organization like Rasmus Dahlin who could take a big step forward. But my question is Taylor Hall the missing piece that will propel the Sabres from being a cellar dweller to a relevant team that could make the playoffs? They're in a tough division, but I'm really curious to see how Taylor Hall will be on the Buffalo Sabres. Former MVP winner just 2 years ago. I think him and Jack Eichel should mesh well, but is that enough to make the Sabres relevant? We then move into Calgary, and my question is, are the stars on the Calgary Flames good enough for the Flames to be a contender and possibly win the Canadian division? Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Matt Tkachuk, and Elias Lindholm have a lot of weight on their shoulders this year to carry for Calgary, and I'm curious how well they carry it. It will be interesting to see how that Canadian division plays out. We then move to Carolina. Will having Svechnikov away from Aho and Teravainen work? Rod Brindamore wants to balance the scoring more, so he's moving Andrei Svechnikov away from Aho. They will still be together on the power play. My question is, how good will this work out for them? It's going to be interesting to see if they stick with this or if they move Svechnikov back to the first line. We then move on to Chicago. Will they get the #1 overall pick? Chicago has some injuries with Taves and Doc. Offense doesn't look too hot outside of Patrick Kane and DeBrincat and Kubalik, but I don't think that's enough. Defense is kind of meh. Goaltending, I mean, leaving a lot to be desired for Chicago Blackhawks fans. My question is, will they get the #1 pick? We then move in to the Colorado Avalanche, and my question is this defensive core championship ready? I'm not really too sure about this. I think there's a lot of young guys here. I know Eric Johnson is injured, and he should get back into this lineup some way. I'm not buying that the Colorado Avalanche are the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. I definitely think they are a contender, and this defense has me questioning things. I know some people are worried about the goaltending. I think the goaltending is good enough, and you just need one of them to play well during the playoffs. Who that will be, I would think it would be Grubauer, but you don't know. But I think this defense has some ways to go before I can definitely put Colorado as my #1 team to win the Cup. Devin Taves was a good pickup, but it's just a very young defense still. We then move on to Columbus, and is the top 6 good enough for them to make the playoffs again? Columbus has been a sleeper team in the last few years, and people are going to continue sleeping on them because the star talent just isn't there, and playing this type of hockey they play can wear on a team, and sometimes those teams can break. I'm very curious to see if this top 6 for them with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Bjorkstrand fully healthy, Domi joins the mix, Miguel Grigorenko's in the top 6 now. Is this good enough? It could be, but it might not be. It should be interesting to see how that plays out. We then go into Dallas, and how will the Dallas Stars do without Bishop and Sagan? Both of them are expected to miss over half the season. Hudobin's going to be the #1. You got Jake Ottinger, the former first-round pick, as the backup now. It's going to be interesting to see how he does and if Hudobin can carry the load as a full-time starter. Hudobin was great in the playoffs last year, but I'm very curious to see if he will be able to continue that as a number one, and if Rupe Hintz can step into that first line center role for Dallas and carry the load while Sagan's out, it's going to be interesting. I think Dallas is still a playoff team nonetheless, but I'm not sure they're going to finish in the top 2 in that division with these injuries. We then move on to Detroit, and should I expect anything less than the bottom of the league is my question. I think the first line's fine. It's a pretty good line, but then outside of that, there's a lot to be desired. How good will Filip Zadina be this year? Robbie Fabry, is he a top 6 center? Vladislav Nemestikov joins the mix. I'm just curious to see if this team can do anything more than be one of the worst teams in the league. I expect them to be pretty low in the league and be contending for that number 1 pick with Chicago. We then go into Edmonton, and can the bottom 6 score? We all know what the top 6 can do with Draisaitl and McDavid. I think the defense is serviceable enough, and Koskinen had a bit of a bounce-back year last year. So my big question is, can you get the bottom 6 to score for nights when the top 6 might have an off night? Because it will happen. They're going to have to score a decent amount of goals just because of how they're structured. So I'm curious, can this bottom 6 get goals for them? It's very much up in the air if this is good enough. We then move into Florida, and will Bob bounce back again? Bobrovsky last year at the beginning of the year was one of the worst goalies in the league, and he slowly climbed his way back to being a decent goaltender towards the end. Florida was pretty close to making the playoffs, and if you consider, if you think about Bobrovsky and think he can be, back to the level he was at, and he plays at that level for the whole season, Florida last year probably makes the playoffs over Toronto, because Toronto was just, no one wanted to take that last divisional spot. Both teams were being pretty crap at the bottom of the East, or the middle of the East, and Bobrovsky being healthy and playing at a higher level could bounce Florida into the playoffs in a Central Division that I don't think is that good. So I'm very curious to see if Bobrovsky can have a bounce back year. We then move into the Kings, and my question is, will the middle 6 scoring improve? Last year they were a one-line team, or should I say one-man team on the forwards, with Anze Kopitar doing everything and no one else really doing much. They add Andreas Athanasiou, which I think is a sneaky little good pickup. Jeff Carter, can he stay healthy? Will Gabe Vilardi take a step forward? There's really a lot to be desired with this Kings team. I think they're ways away from the playoffs, but I do think that last spot in the Pacific Division is kind of up for grabs. So if they get into form, you never know. We then move on to the Wild, and my question is, can you make the playoffs with 4 third-line centers? Bugstad, Bonino, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Victor Rask. None of these guys are really guys that you would look at and say, man, this would be in the top 6, and a lot of other teams, well, maybe the Coyotes, but not a lot of teams would have these guys in their top 6. And they're going to be relying a lot on Kaprizov to really be good right away. They're going to need Kevin Fiala to play out of his mind like he did at the end of last season. The defensive core is good. Cam Talbot, that's another question. How good will he be going back to a starter role? He was good last year as a backup, but can he be good as a starter again? To be determined. There's a lot of questions with Minnesota, and I'm not sure they can make the playoffs, which they may have last year, and they did make the bubble, but they look like they were going for that last spot in the West before the shutdown happened. I'm curious to see what Minnesota is going to be this year. I don't have high hopes. The Canadiens, is the hype real? A lot of people are labeling these guys as winning the Canadian division, and I think that's a little early. You need to prove it for an extended period of time before I buy that you guys are going to win that division or even be in the top 2. I have Edmonton and Toronto above you guys right now, although I think you're a deeper team than Edmonton. I think Edmonton's star power puts them above you when I do my rankings. That being said, you guys need to make the playoffs at minimum, so I'm very curious to see how some of your young guys do. I've heard good things about Romanov, have not seen him play. Kotkaniemi, can he take a step forward? Suzuki, can he take a step forward? Can Thomas Tatar redo what he did last year when he was very good for you? Brendan Gallagher, solid. You know what you're getting there. Deneau. I mean, it's a good team on paper, and they definitely could, but I need to know, is the hype real? I have high hopes for them, but I need to see it play out. Nashville, can the top 6 live up to the potential? Forsberg, Johansson, Duchesne, and Arvidsson have been leaving they left a lot to be desired last year. There's no other way to put it. And you need to see if these guys can bounce back to the form that all of them are capable of having, because they're all solid players. Hollow and Grimaldi, not on the same level as the other 4, but Nashville's season will really be determined by how good this top 6 does. So I'm pretty curious to see if they can bounce back to being the good form that all of these players have had in their careers. We then move to New Jersey, and my big question is, will Jack Hughes break out? Down rookie year last year compared to the expectation that comes with being a first overall pick. But Jack Hughes is a pretty small guy, and hitting the NHL weight room will do wonders for this guy. And I'm really curious to see how Jack Hughes looks in his second season, because I think the growth will be pretty big. We then move on to Nashville again. What? Did I do Nashville twice? Oh, I went backwards, didn't I? Yep, I went backwards. My bad. We then move on to the Islanders, and Will Sorokin proved to be the goalie of the future. I've heard good things about this guy. He's played in the KHL and has dropped very good numbers. Varlamov's still in front of him in my mind until proven otherwise, and I'm curious to see if Ilya Sorokin is the real deal. I think he will be good just because of the way the Islanders play, but I'm curious if he will be undoubtedly better than Varlamov just because of the hype behind him. How good will he be? That's a question I think a lot of us have going into this year. We then move on to the Rangers, which this one's pretty simple. How good is Alexis Lafreniere? We think pretty good. We think he's going to be one of the top players one day in the league just based off potential and what he's done at juniors, but how good will he be straight out the gate? I'm very curious. We then move on to Ottawa, and how will we view the Matt Murray trade after this year? I wanted to talk about Stützle and Josh Norris because I think they're both going to be good for the Sens this year, but I'm very curious to see how this Matt Murray trade works out for the Senators, and if there's some buyer's remorse after the season. Should be intriguing. Flyers, Stanley Cup contenders? Question mark? Yeah, I think so. I think they're the favorites to win the East Division right now. I think their top 9 is one of the most loaded in the league. I think Nolan Patrick could take a step forward. I mean, there's talent at every level of this team, like a very high talent level everywhere. The defense is good too. Kevin Hayes is one of the best second-line centers in the league. Carter Hart, the franchise. I mean, there's no reason to think Philadelphia cannot contend for a Stanley Cup this year. Penguins, can you stay healthy? The Penguins are a playoff team if they're healthy. Everyone on that first power play unit that I listed in the top right missed like 20 games last year at least. Some more than others. Gensel's season got ended pretty early. Brian Rust, I believe, was the only one to stay healthy. And Brian Rust was above a point per game last year. One of 22 players in the NHL to do that. I love to say that because a lot of people don't know that. But if they stay healthy, playoff team. If not, probably not. We then move on to the Sharks. And can Erik Karlsson find his old form? Can he turn back the clock, find the time machine? Because when Erik Karlsson's at the top of his game, he's a top 5 defenseman in the league, and the Sharks could really use that if they want any chance of contending for a playoff spot this year, which I think is possible in the Pacific Division to get that 4th spot, but I don't like their odds. But if Karlsson refines that form, I think you could see it. The Blues, is Krug a good enough replacement for Pietrangelo? Pietrangelo is a better player than Krug, no doubt. Pietrangelo is a top 5 D-man in the league. Torrey Krug is one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, but at 5-on-5 play, definitely a downgrade. And I'm basically curious if you can take out the heart and soul of the team, or one of them, which is Pietrangelo. I know like guys like O'Reilly and others are also a part of the heart and soul of that team, but can Krug be a good enough replacement for Pietrangelo for them to still be one of the top teams in the West? I think they'll be up there. I kind of have them lower than Vegas and Colorado now because of this move, because I'm a Boston fan. I've seen Torrey Krug. You're not going to get what you got out of Alex Pietrangelo. Offensively, you will. Defensively, you will not. I'm curious if your depth can carry you as far. We then move on to the Lightning. Will the loss of Kucherov even matter? I don't think it will. They went without Stamkos for a lot of last year. They won a cup without him. I think this is just a machine. They're going to purr. But if they stumble, you're going to be asking yourself, will the loss of Kucherov matter? And it might, but I don't think it will. But I'm curious to see how they play without him. We then move on to the Maple Leafs, and can they win a division? Now, people want to talk about playoff series. I want to talk about the division, because that division is very winnable. You don't have the boogeymen in your division anymore of the Bruins and Lightning. You are the best team in your division going into it. Can you be front runners, take the division title, and can you make the Final Four? There's high expectations for this team, which comes with a few players making over $10 million. You guys have to win this division, in my opinion, or I'm going to laugh at you. Canucks, will Demko take the job? I think he will. Holtby wasn't good last year. I think there's a reason you move on from Jake Markstrom and only sign Holtby to a 2-year deal. Holtby's going to get the start out the gate, I believe, but I think Demko takes the job, and I'm going to be interested in how that plays out. We then move on to Vegas. Can Cody Glass emerge? Right now, he's listed on the 3rd line. I initially thought he was going to be on the 1st line with Pacioretty and Mark Stone. Not the case to start. So I'm curious if Cody Glass can emerge, because that team desperately needs a top 6 center, and Chandler Stevenson isn't it. We then move on to Washington. Can the top 6 carry this team anymore? I mean, name value-wise, they look good, but I'm a little worried about the high-end scoring on this team taking a step back. Ovechkin last year, only 19 assists. He's a century gun still, so you like it. You like his odds of still potting a bunch of goals. But the rest of the lineup, you got some old guys on the team with Oshie and Backstrom who are both above 33. Vrana's good. Kuzi had a bit of a down year last year. Tom Wilson is what he is. I'm wondering if this high-end scoring is enough to carry the bottom 6, which doesn't look as good. And I'm not as high on the Capitals this year as some people are, but the Capitals usually win a lot of regular season games and make the playoffs. 31 and last, the Jets. Is the defensive core good enough to make the playoffs? I don't think so, but there's a lot of teams who piece together a defensive core that is just good enough. And when the Jets' high-end scoring, this team can make the playoffs, but it really comes down to how good this defense can play as a unit. None of these guys are stars. Josh Morrissey is a good defenseman, a high-tier defenseman in my opinion. Neil Pionk is a great quarterback on the power play. But the rest of them, a lot of unproven guys here who really need to step up for the Jets to make the playoffs. I'm curious to see how that plays out. That is everything I have for you today. A little bit of a longer video. Hopefully some of you like it. Some of you may have tuned out already. But, nonetheless, those are my questions. One for each NHL team. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoy my NHL content, consider hitting the subscribe button, hit the like button, and enjoy the hockey. Thank God it's back. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.